So after spending well and truly over 100 hours plus on the installation of this wiring harness, and the good days and the bad days, and the things that worked well the first time and the things that didn't work well the first time, this is actually truly rewarding, and it feels really, really cool to actually be in this car and finally getting the reward for the hard work, and the sounds and the feels and the smells of getting this project up and running is awesome. There is no feeling like it. It's actually incredible to finally have it on the road and working, and it's actually really cool. So, if you feel like there is no light at the end of the tunnel, and you're just not sure if this is ever going to work out, or if you feel like you're wasting your time, I assure you it is worth it. Just keep plugging away at it, and the reward it's timeless, it's priceless. Oh wow, this is so much better than I remember. He has upholstered everything in this car, which is awesome because I was sleeping in this filth before, and it's so good that he's done this after I had to sleep in it. At least I'm not catching anything from this interior like I was before, so that's great. The itch is nearly gone, so that's fantastic. So now that this car's finished, let's go have a look. So this is a familiar sight. We worked up here for a really, really long time together to get the wiring right. As you remember, we did the injectors, we did the coil wiring, fuel pressure, the drive-by-wire, the fans. We controlled everything in this engine bay. We've got the wideband tucked over there, hidden away in the corner. It's all come together really, really well, and it actually looks really, really nice. He's done a really good job. This breather hose wasn't here before. Set of ignition leads wasn't here before, so he's made them himself. He's done a really, really good job of just getting this together. So well done, Anthony. You've done a really good job. Well, here we are. We're in the car. Beautiful, comfortable seat now, not full of crust and weird furry things that were attacking my legs and giving me rashes. So thank you. Much nicer. He did keep the buttons, but despite my best persuasions to get rid of them, he really did want to keep them. So we've got a trans brake and a bump button here. He can go in and change it in the ECU when he wants to do some rolling anti-lag. He wanted to change that button, so we can definitely do that. We've got the dash installed. This is talking to the ECU via the CAN cable that we ran, so that's really, really easy as well. It actually looks really, really good in here. Even with all of our fancy new technology and maybe just the shifter, it does still look like a really period correct retro 80s car, which is cool. Still got the gear badge over there, which is awesome. The factory dash surround. So this is probably the only thing that's a bit different, but we literally can display every single thing we want to up on the dash. Just makes it work really, really well. So well done. It looks awesome in here and very authentic. So we've gone through the comments that you guys have left, and the marketing team have asked me to go through and find any questions that you guys have asked about the wiring or the car itself. So we're going to try and answer those the best we can for you. And if you've got any follow-up questions, be sure to leave them in the comments for this particular video, and we'll try and address them as well. Beautiful. All right, let's do it. Question number 1. There seems to be quite a lot of contradictory opinions out there, but seriously, is there any advantage to crimping instead of soldering? This will always be a tricky one. Like I said back in the vlog, it was going to be a very controversial subject that I said I don't mind soldering. If you solder correctly, in my opinion, it does work. Solder has been used for ages in harnesses. But like I said, crimping is actually easier for me. It's quicker, and I think it does a really, really good job. The industry standard these days is to crimp it. It does seem to do a better job, and it is neater. And if you're not good at soldering, or it doesn't quite get hot enough, you can find that you get what's called a dry solder joint. That can cause a lot of weird and strange problems that you'll never be able to diagnose. So if you do a very good crimp, and we will get a close-up of this, if we do a really good crimp on a bunch of wires to bring them together, you will get a better result. Question 2. Tester tape. Is there really a difference between the standard stuff and the high temp? Yes, there is. There is a few different styles of this fabric tape and cloth tape that I started using in the vlog. I often opt for these 3 styles of not electrical tape. The first is the fabric tape, which I did use in this wheel well to bring all that wire bunched together that used to run over this strut and fender sort of area. This stuff is really, really good when it's not used in an engine bay. You will find that this stuff, when it touches oil, it becomes a sponge, and it basically absorbs all of that oil. It goes really, really slimy, really, really gross, and it swells up, and it just becomes really, really feral. And it does lose all of its adhesion. If you were to wrap this around some wires to keep them together, and you came back to it about 6 months later, you'll probably find that you'll just be able to pull at this bit, which has probably unheated itself from the actual roll, and you'll just be able to pull all of that off, and it'll just be really slimy and really feral. So probably not ideal for an engine bay because it does soak up oil. Our friends at Car Builders actually have this really, really cool, I guess you call it fabric tape, but they call it underbody tape. This has been really, really cool to use, particularly in engine bay stuff where you wouldn't want to use this cloth tape or electrical tape because it also gets really, really slimy, but this is very oil resistant, and this has been a revelation to use lately. So head to the Car Builders website if you're in Australia. This is the other stuff I like to use as well. It's a Tessa tape, but it's not a fabric tape, it's actually more like a cloth tape. This is really good for heat protection. I like to go over some conduit where I might be protecting a part of the loom to keep it away from heat, and I can wrap it over this just as a safety and just to keep all that conduit, if it is a split conduit, keep it all in one piece, and it just looks super neat and it disappears in the engine bay, so that's cool as well. I just ran a really quick little experiment just to show you guys what would actually happen in this type of scenario when you were maybe taping up some wires near or under an engine. I poured a bit of oil just over the top of this fabric tape, and yeah, wow, it barely does anything that it should do anymore. It's just soaked up all that oil, probably in about 5 minutes, and it's pretty much become absolutely useless. Amazingly, I didn't pour any oil on the thinner version of this same tape, but just whatever's fallen off this was also just, it doesn't even work anymore. It will just fall off, and your uninsulated joins or anything like that will become completely useless because they're just going to short out on something. So really good for inside the car, really good from away from liquids. This is that other tape I was talking about. It's keeping its rigidity and structure and stickiness. Well, maybe not here, but this would normally be stuck to itself. It is a self-amalgamating tape, so it sticks to itself really, really well, but you can see it's holding its form and its stickiness a lot better. Even here, see how the oil doesn't come through the tape and get to the underside where it's all sticky? This is where this tape comes into its own, so it's really, really good. This is that other tape that I was talking about, which is really good for the heat protection. Heaps sticky still, like I'm working to get it unstuck. So you can see that the oil doesn't go through this tape either. So really, really good for engine bay, really, really good for inside. Alrighty, next question. When you wired up the coils, did you use a HPI? couldn't see one getting wired up. So when someone says a HPI, we are talking about an ignition module. When you have a coil that does not have an ignition module inbuilt, you need an external ignition module. On this build, when we did our wiring, we used an LS coil. This is an LS1 shaped coil. The coils that were in this car are what we classify as an LS2 style coil. Very, very similar, just a little bit different in shape. Performance might be arguably better on an LS2 being a newer coil. The pinout is very, very similar, but it's actually flipped. So you wire it backwards on an LS2 coil. Very, very similar though, in the way that they both work with an inbuilt ignition module. This saves a lot of wiring mess and just extra stuff that we have to do in terms of crimping to get our coils to work. On a external module, we wire up the ECU ignition output into our ignition module. Our ignition module then fires a transistor, which then fires the signal into the coil, and then the coil creates a spark for the spark plug. The beauty of an inbuilt module is that we do away with this mess and simply replace it with a big, strong, bulky coil that can do a better job than probably these two things put together. So this is a really neat and easy way of getting it done, and sometimes does prove to even be a better result. Next question. Can you join all of the coil grounds before they make a connection to the grounding point? I actually did do that in this particular car. It's not something that I normally do. I actually often run each individual ground for the coil separately up to the head, and I actually ground those 4 or 8 wires all together in a lug, and then ground that to the engine as 8 separate wires. Typically, that's how I do it. In this car, because I didn't quite know, because it wasn't finished, I didn't know how long to make these wires, so I did actually join all 4 coils from one bank and 4 coil grounds from another bank, crimp them into one thicker wire, and then ran those wires excessively long so that I could get to where I needed to go with any route that I needed to go. I just wasn't sure how it was going to finish or what hoses were needed up the back there, so I didn't want to get in the way of anything yet. So yes, you absolutely can. Do I normally do it? No. Another question. What type of crimping terminal did you use on the injector branching examples? We're going to keep that one because I reckon the next question is also very similar. When you joined the single power wire to the 8 injector wires, I saw a single crimp, but how did you do it? And then when you branched off those different wires, how did you use the crimp? Let's just absorb all 4 of those questions into one. These are the little crimps that I like to use. Unfortunately, when this video went up, I put in a really good link for RS components. They had a really, really good range of these. And pretty much the day after I put that link up in that video, RS no longer sold these. So that's been really, really helpful because everyone then bombarded me with, no, I can't get them from RS. Where do I get them from now? I found a really good supply at EFI Hardware. They're an Australian distributor for all sorts of little plugs and coils and tape and all this sort of stuff. Anything EFI related, they've got awesome stuff. Anything Carby related, they've got heaps of stuff also. So definitely check them out. I get these little crimps from EFI Hardware. They sell them in little packs of 20. These are really, really, really helpful. I found these great for anything for 2, 3, 4 wires even, just normal sort of 22, 24 gauge wiring for your signals, grounds, like if we were joining all these together, that's pretty much exactly what this is for. And then maybe 2 thicker wires, like 18 gauge wires, you can put 2 of those wires in here and crimp that beautifully. So that works really, really well. When we're talking about going from one big power wire for our injectors to 8 separate power wires to go out to our 8 different injectors, I often go for a much bigger crimp. This can also get very, very tricky to crimp if you don't have the right tool. I get these from RS Components. They deliver worldwide. You can also get a version of this from EFI Hardware as well. But to crimp this, I just bought these really cheap, cheerful crimpers ratcheting crimpers also, off eBay, of all places. I could have got a much better quality from any of the big wiring distributors like ProWire over in America. There are big fancy ratcheting crimpers that are this big. They can do really beautiful crimps with these styles of crimps. My good mates Benny and Al told me that they often use these ECU pins. So these are the ECU pins that come with the connector sets for the Haltech ECU plugs. They found out that when they were in a bind, they could actually use just the bottom half of the ECU pin. So they just cut the top half off, and then they were able to slide 2 or 3 wires together, give it a crimp with the ECU crimps, and this would almost do the job of these fancy crimps, except they do actually cost more money than the normal crimp. So if you find that you need to do a crimp but you don't have one around, use the ECU pin to get yourself out of a bind. Does work. The next question we've got is, can you use the same process for branching off power for one wire to separate ignition coils, or is that only for the injectors? Depending on the setup that you've got and that you're working with your wiring, typically the answer is yes, you can do exactly the same thing. You can branch your one power wire out to 4 separate coils. Do that with a good crimp or a really, really good quality solder joint, and you will not have any problems. So yes, you absolutely can do that for coils and injectors. 5 volt, signal ground as well, or even power ground. Do whatever it takes to get the job done correctly. The last question the marketing team have given me is, when you said, "I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed," which I'm sure we can all relate to, can you let us know what the most costly, worst, time-consuming mistake you have ever made while wiring? Yeah, there've been a few because, like I said, only human. We all make mistakes, particularly when we're tired. Often, I like to think that when I'm on a roll and I've been making really, really good progress, I like to keep going because the momentum is there and you can get the job done really, really quickly, nicely. But when you are tired, you do often overlook things and make mistakes. So when you think you're on a roll, you come back the next day and it just doesn't work because you were just tired. So that's probably one pro tip that I could give you, is definitely do not do this job if you're tired. You won't be able to concentrate properly and you will get the wires the wrong way around because you're just not thinking properly. Early mornings through till normal business days, so about 5 or 6 o'clock is obviously when you're going to be most awake, but we all have jobs, so we often try and do our cars at night time. So do it when you are awake. Don't wire into the mornings. We often get tech support calls in the office from people that are frustrated and typically who are awake really, really late trying to figure out why stuff isn't working. Do it with a fresh head. That is a suggestion from me. A very time-consuming, costly one. Unfortunately for me, I found out that I relied on somebody else's grounding method in the car, and I was trying to fix a mistake or a weird issue that was happening in the car, but I relied on the grounding and didn't check it. When I went to crank the car, pretty much every single ground under the dash, that goes under the carpet, when I cranked the car, all of those grounds became a better ground than the one that was in the boot that was holding the battery ground to the actual floor of the car. All of those grounds effectively caught fire. That wasn't great. So when I went and investigated, I found that somebody had used a roofing screw to actually put the ground for the battery into a Datsun floor, and it had just worked its way loose and was not making very good contact at all. So luckily the wires didn't catch fire as such, but they all got very, very hot. So definitely always check your grounding in the car, because it can be very, very costly if it goes wrong. Likewise, when you're coming in to try and troubleshoot somebody else's problem, or you've got a weird problem that you didn't necessarily make from that harness, always go back to the very, very beginning. Don't rely on somebody else to do the right thing. It's still going to be your problem. So you may as well go back and start checking from the very, very beginning, which is always the ground and the battery positive. We've got to make sure that they're going to the right place in the car, and that we're not doing any shortcuts which will create problems in the long term. Well, that's it for now. We might have another wiring series coming up if there is enough demand for it, or if the marketing team just tells me to do it. So we'll just see what happens there. I don't necessarily have to listen to them anymore. So I'm out. See ya.